Welcome back. You're now watching the lifestyle segment on the weekend show brought to you by Holocrunch Popcorn. Now, on the 31st of July 2022, the Independent National Electoral Commission suspended the continuous voters registration program. At the moment, 12 million Nigerians have been added to the voters register, and it's also been reported that 71% of those people are youths. How does this affect the 2023 elections? How do we ensure that our votes count, and how do we also make sure that our votes are protected? And joining me today, we have two beautiful guests to have this conversation, and I'll start with Olamide Apoje. Lami, welcome back on the weekend show.
Thank you for having me.
Tell me about your thoughts on the continuous voters registration exercise, which we've seen that has brought about another 12 million people added to the voters registration list.
I mean, it just shows that Nigerians, and like I said some time back when I was on this show, that this election is a very definitive one for Nigerian youths, millennials in general. And we can see that from even the voters registration turnout. So people are very eager, and I can see the apathy for for politics in general dwindling, because people are saying, you know what, we know that we have the power if we come out en masse. So one can only pray that when it's time to actually vote, they turn up in those numbers. That's it.
Olamide is a PR consultant and communications expert. Also joining us on the show, we have Khalil Halil, the founder of Cans Park. Now, I also understand that you're quite passionate about safe elections and fair processes, and you've created an application which helps with the process. Tell us about this.
Well, the application we've created is called Zabe Election Monitoring, and the whole idea is, to use digital tools to make elections safer and also more transparent. So this application goes, from result collation, parallel tabulation, incidence reporting, resource center. As you know, this election is very big on voter education, where you can dump in file for people to consume. And other features such as contact center, for security, where people can report in case there's an issue. But further buttressing what Lami said earlier with regards to the participation of youths in this election. Last election, a lot of people kind of ignored the trends happening around social media, but with having 71% youth inclusion in the new registration, definitely social media is not something you can ignore. We've seen movements like the NSAS in the past and the kind of impact it has created, and definitely is going to have a big impact during these elections. So parties will need to start carrying a lot of youth along, trying to send messages how they are going to be inclusive in their plans, and that will affect the results of the coming election.
Okay. I remember when the National Assembly was working on the Electoral Amendment Act, and they had to bring in people from the NCC to speak about data coverage and if results could be electronically transmitted. Same question applies to your application. Internet penetration is reasonably high in Nigeria, but mostly in urban areas. How does this work within the rural areas?
So the way we built our application is it works both on GPRS as well as SMS. So in places where you don't have internet coverage, still the SMS will suffice. But the last option is what we call the offline functionality, where whatever thing you reported is stored locally on the device, and once it gets a single bar of signal, it pushes it onto the server. So last election we had about 97% coverage, and this election I'm sure will have much more than that, because there has been improvement in the coverage of networks all over the country.
That's amazing. Let's come back to you, Lami. 8.7 million of the registered voters in this new registration are between the ages of 18 and 34, and another 2.4 million of those within my age group, 35 to 49. What really is the role of young people, considering that in the last couple of elections, nobody has won with more than 20 million votes in total per top candidates? What really is the role of young people in the 2023 elections with these numbers?
Again, like I said earlier, it really boils down to showing up on those days when it's time to vote. We own these elections. We have the numbers, including both the president's new registered voters, and of course, over the previous years, we need to come out en masse and vote. We determine the numbers, and like anybody that is backed by the youth right now stands a very high chance of, you know, clinching the tickets and winning the elections. Like I said, I hope that the momentum continues to build. I hope that at some point people do not get weary and say, you know what, we're not getting involved. But again, Osun election showed us that when you show up, your votes count. And I like how everything is now. Once you vote, it's going on the server. INEC is publicizing. There's no time for you to, if you want to do anything you want to do, it better be before people actually press their thumbs. So right now, it's more transparent than it's ever been. And now there's no room for foul play, I think. I think for the most part, I can say and beat my chest that INEC knows what they're doing, especially with, you know, collecting results and publicizing it. So it now depends on people showing up on those days to actually vote and stand for their vote and see and ensure that, you know, they're counted, they uploaded on the server, and, you know, that's, you know, they're doing the right thing.
So I think it's amazing that the Electoral Act was amended and signed, even though it was rejected about 3 times. And so now we have the electronic transmission of results, yes, which we saw in, I think, Ekiti State and Osun State. Yes. Within about 12 hours, results were in and people could forecast. But with political aspirants, especially the APC and PDP, most of their spokespersons have spoken about social media and how people just make noise on social media. Khalil has spoken about how social media helps with election transparencies. But people are now moving from social media to go register. If they'll pick their cards and go vote, it's another conversation. But do you feel that social media drives conversation, or is it just noise like the traditional politicians would have people think? Even
they know that it's not hype and spin, it's a fact. Nothing started social media noise like the 2015 elections, especially the APC, in coming to say, you know, we're taking power back, you know, from the PDP. So for them to come and say that it's all noise and hype and spin, it's actually a bit disingenuous, because they rode on the back of social media in 2015 and in 2019. These are the same political parties that actually send out boats to go and defend them on social media. So to say that it's not, you know, the true representation of our society is a lie. Of course, we have scenarios when people come and tell false news, but even from the true elections, I knew that the PDP was going to win by the predictions from social media and by people reporting numbers and saying, oh, this is happening here, they're rigging here, they're not letting people rig there, and all of that. So it's very, very important that we pay more attention, if anything, to social media.
Talking about social media, I've seen a lot of polls lately, especially on Twitter, with 4 major presidential aspirants. That's for the APC, PDP, Labour Party, and NNPP. Yes. And you say sometimes from the polls you can forecast. Will you say that the 2023 elections, based on the loudest voices on social media, would that have real impact when it comes to voting?
Maybe not loud voices on social media, but like what people are echoing, there'll be undertones. Do I think it's going to determine the outcome of the elections? No, but I think it's going to shape how the elections be. For instance, it depends on the body language of social media and people saying, you know what, oh my God, so we had, for instance, in my polling unit, we had only 100 people last year, and this year we have 1,000 people. That shows that somebody is going to, you know, and then of course, if you see that the majority of them are youth, and, you know, maybe people who have been active in, for instance, like Khalil said, NSAS and all of those movements, people like that, you then begin to forecast that. But to say it's going to, you know, show us how it's going to be entirely, maybe not, but it will shape, definitely, it will guide us to see, you know, how the outcome of the election is going to be.
Khalil, in every election in Nigeria, it may not be publicized, but people always lose their lives. It's even more unfortunate that we have core members who are now sent to help with the election processes. And so they are the first line of target. And so while with your app, you try to ensure that elections are reported well, what can be done to also protect these young Nigerians who are putting their lives on the national stage as sacrifice to ensure that we have free and fair elections?
Okay, I mean, even from the last election that we ran with this application or the upgrade now, one of the highest group of people that were reporting on the application were actually the NYSC cops. Some speaking about, okay, how they were not paid, some speaking about unfriendly environments, you know, that they've encountered. What I would like to call on, and I see more of them, reporting this time around. What I would like to call on is to understand that, they are doing a national sacrifice, and we need to have a better response, to their calls, be it as individuals, non-governmental organizations, or the government, itself, because they are really, really working hard to ensure that things are, going on smoothly. I think one of the INEC chairman, I think Jega, literally said, "We are giving you your future in your hands," by giving that role to NYSC COP members to play in. So yes, they are doing the hard work, and they need to be protected, and response need to happen almost immediately.
Okay, so one of the reasons why the continuous voters registration was suspended is to give INEC time to release the list of all the people registered across all the wards and local governments in the country, and then give people time to edit and update their records before collecting their PVCs. We've seen cases, where before the elections, a lot of PVCs are not collected, even though people have registered. Why is there this disconnect from number of registered voters versus people who actually get their PVCs before the elections?
I want to sincerely say that it's probably just lack of, adequate preparation, because I think two things can happen at the same time. People can still be registering for votes and to collect their voters card, and people can also be, Kali is the tech guy here, he can put us through. I'm sure that there are solutions that once you deploy it, you're getting abroad. I'm sure that you can order online, put in your, we have NIN now, you can put in your details, everything is in sync, you have your BVN and everything linked together, and in no time you get your card. I don't know what special technology it is that they're deploying to, that'll take them that long, but I think that it shouldn't be rocket science to be able to get your permanent voters card. I don't know if you can add to that.
You see, one of the things that happened from last election was the fact that people kept on moving. So by that, you're probably in Lagos and you've moved to Abuja, so the card production, it's delivered in Lagos. So when that happens, then people don't have the incentive to go, and collect it. So we've seen a lot of, that happening. But I think probably what INEC needs to do is to move to virtual card. We've seen the same has happened with the national identity, where you can have a virtual NIN nowadays. So with that, it makes it easy, for people to, it's auto-assigned, basically. And then we'll likely see more turnout in the election.
And I think you're right, because recently I went to get my booster shot for the COVID vaccine, and all they needed was my phone number, which they put into their portal, and it brought up all my vaccination records. And so if this can be done with vaccines, it begs the question why we need to go post papers on walls in wards when this can be done digitally. But we do hope and pray that these features are improved and enhanced. But leveraging technology, what other solutions do you feel our government can put in place for free, fair and safe elections?
Well, now we've seen the beavers, very impressive, I must say, with the INEC.
Tell us about the beavers. What's that about for people who...
It's biometric identification of the voter. So when you come with your card, then now you have to use your biometrics to authenticate that you're actually at the polling unit, which brings more credibility. And at the same time, it captures the result sheet and transmit electronically, for the whole world to see. And I think the other step that needs to take is the collation. On the public portal, it doesn't happen automatically. There has to be some semi-automated or semi-manual process that can also be improved. But we see that every election cycle, INEC is doing something new. As a government agency, you must commend that happening, and we just need to see faster, changes. As you know, Nigeria is one of the fastest in terms of catching up with technologies. When you talk about, for example, WhatsApp penetration, which is also part of social media. Oftentimes we speak about social media, but we forget that WhatsApp is a social media,
a huge part.
in terms of spreading information.
Interesting that you said that. I read that in some countries, social media is more popular than the internet, and so most people know more about Facebook than they know about the internet. And so leveraging all of this, which we have, plays a major role. But while we reel this in, let me. 95 million registered voters voting for 1,491 constituencies in total, from presidency to National Assembly and State House of Assembly and governors. We've had this conversation about structure. 1,491 positions, but 95 million Nigerians. Do you feel this conversation about structure, party supremacy, and the like supersedes the power of 95 million voters? Or is there a constant need to believe that without this thing called structure, people can't win elections?
I mean, these numbers are the disparity between 90-something million and 1,000. Again, I think this election is going to show us who the real power belongs to, either the people or the political parties. I cannot say for sure, but ideally with those numbers, you don't need any party restructure. Look at what happens in France. We can have a Macron literally come and say, you know what, I'm a small party, and because we have the numbers, because the numbers supersede the amount of positions, the amount of people in these political parties, the amount of Nigerians voting, the amount of people registered to vote, the amount of people that have the power in their hands with their PVCs to vote supersedes these parties, ideally. So these elections should show us, a glimpse of what that can look like, hopefully, like I said, if people actually turn out to vote. One problem that we've always had over the years is voter turnouts, not the fact that people aren't registered. A lot of people, somebody was telling me how a lot of people use voters registration as just a means of identification, not because they want to vote. But we need to start changing that mindset to tell people that, what, you really have the power in your hands, and these numbers and these votes actually do count. That's it.
So what are your final words to our viewers on the coming elections?
My final words will be that, look, the power is in your hands. We have seen that we have the numbers to make change. We have the power to say we no longer want, a redundant government. We want change of any kind that you want, whether in whatever ideology that you deem fit, in whatever kind of party that you deem fit. So I think that you must now take the power and ensure that you go out there to vote. It's one thing to get your PVCs, but it's another thing to actually go out on that day to vote and fight for your rights as a Nigerian, and for the kind of future that you want for your children and generation to come.
Khalil, any final words?
I think we need to embrace more of technology. We've seen how it has made life easier. Today, Nigeria has one of the best banking softwares, all over the world, and one of the fastest as well, despite all the complaints that we have. And we've seen how from the old, technologies INEC is using to the BVAS, and even with the structure that you are talking about earlier, we need to see how we can use technology to replace that, where you don't really need to have those number of people, that once you have a certain spread, that have voted or authenticate, you should qualify, to eliminate that, the need, which will give other smaller parties opportunities to participate in elections. So my parting words would be, let's embrace technology and see how it can make life easier for us.
Khalil Halilu and Olamide Afejoy, thank you so much for joining us on the Lifestyle segment. And to our viewers at home, you've heard from Nigerians like yourself. It goes beyond just registering to vote, but you need to make sure you get your PVC, you vote, and you protect your vote, because the future of Nigeria at this point is in our hands. Don't go away. We have Entrepreneur Spotlight shortly after this break.